Sup, Gloomers? Today we're going to be talking about the Soul Tether. It's just the Soul Tether. The Soul Tether, also previously known as the Summoner. Several times in this video, I'm going to say Summoner instead. Deal with it. I'm going to get used to this name eventually. But that's okay. We love people who love the idea of changing their names. So the Soul Tether has undergone a kind of a significant facelift because the largest hand size change in the game, and ultimately the toolkit is so much different. Even though it's got the same concept, it has the capacity to do so much more than it did, and ultimately I'm like really excited about this. This is definitely one of the ones I've been trying to get them to show off for a while now, so I'm really happy that now we have at least the cards and the perks now. So I'll just take into the concepts now. It's super fun. If you want to be kept up to date with all things Gloomhaven, 2nd edition or otherwise, as well as Frosthaven, be sure to subscribe. We are starting a Let's Play Frosthaven stream, so if that's entertaining, check us out. It'll be on every Wednesday. Additionally, if you want to support us, for the easiest ways to hit like, but if you really want to, consider joining our Patreon. It really helps. So the Soul Tether has a couple of notable changes. First off, the hand size bouncing from 9 to 12 is huge. Obviously, some people are like, hey, what about Unending Dominance? And it's the card's so different now, it doesn't need a bail out of small hand size mechanic like Spellweaver Light anymore. It just uses these summons differently. Now, some people are like, well, does it use non-lost summoners like the Bone Shaper? No, but it's got its own thing, and you just have to get used to using your summons effectively. That's something you already had to do, but it's just the players that were able to do it effectively before now have a very interesting capacity to do it now, because there's just more cards that you can bring to add to your toolkit. And one of the problems of having such a small hand size is this is the class you wanted to bring various tools to a scenario, but sometimes would get cut due to hand size. So this is largely remedied by changing the types of losses, changing the power of some cards to make some of them just slightly weaker, to make sure you can just kind of sustain that stamina while still adding a significant amount to your toolkit, so you can do a variety of things. And not all the summons are just like, hey, congratulations, do the same thing. And obviously Thorn's Shooter is mega nerfed. And if you didn't expect that, come on. That was the easiest nerf in the whole game. That doesn't mean you don't have the ability to bail yourself out. They've changed Unending Dominance, so we'll get to that in a second, to potentially give you an bail yourself out, as well as you have some ability to protect your summons through other means. So even if you have some of those hiccups, because it doesn't matter, you can't predict everything, you can't use Boots of Speed to bail yourself out of 100% of situations, so sometimes bad things happen. You have a couple of emergency buttons that you can bring regardless. The goal is basically how many of these tools that you do, like fail safes, do you want to bring is up to you, and I think that's good to put it on the player. So not only that, but the fact you have a variety of summons, but you have more summons that interact with, are the elements waning or not, or the summons, when they die, they infuse elements. So there's a lot more interactions with summons and elements, and that's something I really like. We're going to get into one of the X summons that ultimately is super slow, but if you have the right element infused, you can get it to move super fast. It can honestly kind of outdamage some of its competitors, but it might not get into position unless you control elements effectively. So some people may go, that sounds annoying, but you can skip it. Those are not necessarily mandatory to play the class effectively at all. And last but not least, there are some summons that now no longer attack, but just apply a status effect. Like, you're going to get some that apply either Poison or Muddle at level 1. They have a new thing where they focus enemies within range that don't have that condition. So the good part is that if something's been poisoned and they have a long-range poison, they're just going to work on trying to poison as many enemies as possible. So they're not going to just keep on slapping the same thing over. Now, some people are like, that sounds like Thorn Shooter. Yeah, but trust me, it's not the same as it was before, but it's still good. We've been talking about these cards and concepts, so we should just dig into the cards. But I think the basic thing is you have a larger toolkit. Some elemental interactions with summons are going to be in there, including if they're strong or waning. And lastly, the summons, now some of them don't have attack, but instead apply conditions and have different focus roles. We can see the rules adjustments here, but let's just jump into the cards, starting with the first. Ethereal Gust. So initiative is super important for the Soul Tetherer. For any summoner in general, initiative is important. And 14 is the undercut you need. So yoink, very easy pick just for that, but also the ability to push 2 of your summons in the right direction, because since it's Grant, keep in mind, Grant means you control it. So because of that, if you need to get them to hit an enemy and then pull them out of position, like, no, thanks for killing them, get out. You can do that with this. You don't just need to move them forward. It does give you an experience as well in the process. For the most part, we'll see something like that for either using the initiative to beat enemies, as well as putting your summons into safe positions, or putting them in positions where your allies can jump in and possibly take the hits instead. And the bottom is one of your wind generators. Keep in mind, you use 3 elements in this class: dark, fire, and air. So you're going to need, you're not going to usually use all of them. As a matter of fact, when I did play this class, usually I focused on 1, maybe 2, but it's just almost impossible to just use every element in the toolkit. It's not impossible, but it's certainly more of a challenge. Regardless, this class also suffers, and we're going to see this shortly, from mobility issues. So move 3 is actually really good for you. So even move 3 and infuse an element, it's really good. This is a very easy pick. Forged Ferocity. So this is your tank summon. We're actually going to look at another summon later that'll really help that out, because it depends on if you want to bring your own tank or if you want to summon your own tank. This is the tank summon. 7 health, 2 moves. It's perfectly fine, and it does have Shield 1 and Retaliate. The Shield 1 self and Retaliate 1 is really nice. The Attack 1 is pretty weak overall, but lets the rest of the abilities on it make it work. Now, Shield 1 is usually not enough to carry it, so we're gonna get to another summon later that will help mitigate some of the attacks on this Forged Ferocity. So, but 7 health with a shield is usually enough that you can get by. And if you need a summon that's just in the front line to take the hits while your party does a lot of damage, you can effectively be that Pokemon master that says, go and like take the hits for me, and here, have some heals, here, like keep them up, keep them shielded, and it'll chip away with that little Retaliate and the Attack 1s too. So it's not like it does nothing. It's not like the harmless contraption. This will actually contribute some effort. Unfortunately, it does require a little bit of effort to put it in that position. So some people are going to be like, I don't want to do that. I just want to blow stuff up. Or, hey, we've got a really cool bruiser who's taking all the hits. I don't need this. Great. Not every group is going to need it. But for the groups that do want to do this or do need this, this is it. Also, the Soul Tether needs fire for a few cards, and you don't have a lot of fire generation. Luckily, the bottom allows you to very easily strengthen one of your summons at no range and no sight. Just strengthen one of them. Great. Infuse fire. Non-loss, advantage, and infuse an element. That's good. Now it's infuse fire, but fire actually has some pretty cool uses. The first time I played this, I went a little bit more heavy into fire, and I like that. Although I think I'm going to try a little bit more of the dark build later. That's ultimately just going to be kind of my own plan. But this is largely a good card if you're going heavy for the fire build, if you're going to be doing some damage, which fire usually does, and if you need to tank. It's just the easy tank pick. Living Knight. So a little bit of a change. First off, the Initiative 96 is something I love because I always like doing late summons, early cuts the next round. So this is one where you can drop it and almost never is anything going to happen after this thing's been summoned, so that you can summon them super safe. Obviously, they look exactly as they were before. You get 2 wolves. The only difference is the Pierce is 1 instead of 2, which does suck, but the Spirit Wolves are already pretty good to begin with. And it also allows you to channel your inner thrall, because we all played Warcraft 3 when we were kids, assuming... I'm assuming... You've played Warcraft 3, right? But also, the passive ability. Whenever any Shadow Wolf dies, you get Dark, which is great. And then the other Shadow Wolf goes invisible. So you get Dark twice, because 2 of them are probably going to die unless you can protect them. And you can protect them, so don't worry about that. But even then, if one dies, the other goes invisible. And that's one easy way to protect the other in case like some really bad effect goes out. But this is one that I tried that out, the new version, and I'm actually really fond of it. The invisibility was pretty neat. Also, there's another card you can do to get it back. I did one where I did like, I'm going to chuck out poison, give my guys advantage here, have a bunch of attacks, watch them die, went invisible, then brought this card back, because you can actually still recover losses, and brought them out again, and watched the things get poisoned. Like, we were fighting things with shields, and it was just like, okay, they're poisoned and Pierce, congratulations. The things just melted him, and I'm like, I don't know if this is too strong or if I'm just playing it well. So Ultimately, I'm still a really big fan of the top of this card. I think some people who are going to focus on just dealing damage may focus on one single damage dealer rather than this, but this is something I personally leaned towards in the couple scenarios that I did get to play the Soul Tether. The cool part about the bottom of Living Night, this is actually kind of a tanking ability. So the next 2 times one of your summons gets attacked, they suffer disadvantage and 1 damage. It also infuses Dark. Keep in mind that when this gets put into play, it does last forever until those 2 attacks land. But giving them disadvantage, first off, one of the worst things that can happen to summons is usually getting crit, because like sometimes you can say, oh, my summon can take a hit times 2. Oh crap, and you can't just like put iron helmets on your summons. I mean, by the rules you can't, but like, you know, it would be really cool if you could like have cute little wolves with helmets on it. Just imagine that. It just sounds fun. It also makes them suffer damage. This is really fun with the Forge Ferocity, by the way, because they take retaliate damage and suffer damage, and they have disadvantage to attack your shielded thing. That can add up. But no, this is just a good way to protect your summons if you don't want those wolves. Also, if you do want to summon a summon late because you want to protect it, this gives you that late initiative tool to put them into play, and then you can also set up Dark to use one of your Dark consuming abilities later, which we'll get to those shortly. Wild Animation, hey, it's the Thorn Shooter. So the top of it's pretty basic, it's just a heal. It doesn't have to heal a summon, it can heal a friend, it can heal yourself, heal 3 at range 4. Pretty basic. The biggest part about the toolkit is if you do need to play support role for your party, you've got it. If you need to keep yourself up, you've got it. And if you need to heal your tank, summon, you've got it. It serves all those roles. The bottom, on the other hand, is your poisoner. It does no longer attack. I know some people are like, oh, look at that, the attack's been removed. Yeah, I know, but it was so broken before. Also, having to tune down some of the summons just to make sure that it's not overpowered in a 12-hander. You can kind of play the Soul Tether as a 9-handed class with a like extended first rest period sit of play. So you've got a lot of plays, and then when you rest, after your first rest, you feel way more limited. But if you can like keep those summons alive, you can play 9-handed and get all the benefit of these. So I wouldn't say like, oh no, this is the one summon. No, don't play one summon. I'd say like go for 2 minimum and try to keep them all up the whole scenario. And if then you've got your bailout, which we'll get in a second. But this one is really easy to protect. The move 2 is fine, but range 4 poison, and it'll always try to poison the next enemy within range. This will start to disseminate poison throughout all your enemies, allowing you to take them down way quicker. Especially if you're bringing something like Living Wolves, where the poison now no longer adds up to 1 damage, but 2, and the ability to grant things even more. This quickly adds up to just a few damage every time you can drop a poison on a thing, especially depending on what allies are also attacking it too. I think the value on this, even though nerfed, is still really strong. Planner Protection, disarm at range 4. So that's super protective. That's just a really good card. 94 also allows you to pair it with like, if you want to summon a bottom summon late, and you do have a few of them, including on this card. I like both halves of this card. If you just want to play disarm, you have the ability to play controller in your group. So I know the life tether can be a defender, a striker, a leader, or a controller. And I think that's incredible. That's actually really well balanced while being able to do anything. But the disarm is one of your best forms of like leader or controller, where you can say, I'm going to mitigate the damage. That enemy is not attacking this turn, or not attacking next turn. If you're going really late, you can pick out one enemy. The summon, on the other hand, first off, move 2 health is not great, but again, it's got a range of 3 and you can protect. It's just very easy to protect range summons. That's just the big thing. But you can control the grant ability of the summon, but this one will just start to muddle enemies that are nearby, and since muddle falls off, it'll often like keep permanent disadvantage on whatever's closest to it, while also at the end of its turn grant something shield 1. This means that if you play a constant amount of early initiatives, you can keep a shield up on something. So like if you get the Bruiser, and there's another locked class, and if you know what I'm talking about, it's still like that. But or the Bruiser. So like if you have these really tanky characters, you can effectively keep a +1 shield on addition to whatever other shields they can maintain, and make them very difficult to kill. But also on the Forged Ferocity, The cool part is you can constantly hand out Muddle to make enemies attack with disadvantage while also keeping your Forged Ferocity at 2 shield for the whole scenario, which you're like, wait, is that summon gonna tank? The answer is yes. Watch as your Rift Spirit and Forged Ferocity make the scenario significantly easier for your allies, and watch them just start to just tear down enemies because they no longer have to care about taking as much damage. And that's super strong. Of course, you still have some capacity where a bunch of enemies go and take it down. So it's not like, congratulations, you have found the secret to winning any scenario. No, it's clearly not foolproof. 7 health and 2 shield isn't going to make you immune to everything, but it does give you a lot of power. It is especially having several cards in your toolkit that give disadvantage and healing. Now, of course, the Rift Spirit does cost you your disarm, but some people may not even be bringing that to begin with. Mighty Bond. There's 2 of these, Mighty Bond and Bonded Might. So let's just talk about both of them. It's the same card. Control a summon, move +0, attack +0, gain an experience. And 51 or 61 initiative. The initiative on both of them suck. I don't like I don't like middle initiatives, and I don't think I ever will, but that's part of the balance here. One of them has a teleport 2, but if you have dark, it's a teleport 4 with experience. Keep in mind that you have crap mobility, so turning this into a teleport 4 is gigantic. But you still have some options with the teleport 2, and worst case scenario, you can command one of your summons to do something cool, which is good. So, and this also scales well with level, because as you get better summons, this card becomes more powerful, so that's pretty strong as is. Bonded Might as well. Bonded Might, on the other hand, allows you to consume wind to move for free, which is great, and it gives you an experience if you do that. Then you loot 1. So, worst case scenario, you loot everything near you, which is fine. If you have wind, you can move and then loot. But then you still get your top action. So if you can use your elements correctly, you could either move very far or move and then loot. And they both have some very useful tops as well. So they're both kind of universally pretty strong, but a lot of summoners, especially because you have a 12 hand size, and this is good for basically any life tether. Congratulations. These are very easy picks. Burning Passion. Love that name. I think Drew said this too. He's surprised that that name of the cards. Anyway, somehow stuck throughout the editions. This one doesn't allow you to strengthen a summon. It does, but it is strengthened 2 things within range 4. This could be yourself, this can be your summons, this can be your really strong striker friend. This is just a good way of doing like striker build for either improving the damage that you're about to land with one of your summons or buffing one of your allies. So this kind of serves as more of a leader striker role, but also gives you fire, and fire's good. Also, that initiative 12 is incredibly good for undercuts, so if you do need some control, this gives you that. The problem that top has is that's not very good for the tank build, but look at the bottom. The next time one of your summons would suffer damage this round, negate it. Now if you're like, well, you know, I've got shield 2 and then they moved up to attack 3 and then only blocked 1 damage. Yeah, that's fine, but sometimes if you're actually just going for more of a heavy striker build, you may say, hey, I'm just going to block 1 whole hit. Congratulations, that summon eating your face is now going to eat your face another turn, and you did nothing to it. Also, even then, for the tanky builds, you may still want to block attacks anyways, so yeah, it's still a good card. Also, the initiative 12. So, depends on if you want to push out more damage, the top is still incredible, and if you need an initiative undercut, this one's it for you, and if you want to block damage, it's good. Depends on what you need in your toolkit, but this is one that I'm personally leaning towards as a very easy take for all builds. Unending Dominance. So this one is your, get out of jail free card, but it's super cool. But I know it's a loss, but first off, recover a lost card. So you said, oh crap, I summoned this and now they're dead. Guess what? They're back. You trade 1 card for another. With a 12 hand size, you can absolutely do this. Also, you go invisible, which is super strong because you do want to often protect yourself. And then the next part is any summon summoned by the next summon you summon. Summon. They gain invisible. So not only are you invisible, you can then say, hey, my next summons I create are invisible. Also notice it says summons. So if you're like, how crap, all my wolves died. This literally happened in one scenario where we were testing, where I was like, cool, I'm going to poison the crap out of these. We're going to have these wolves go through the whole scenario, blah, 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 blah. And partway through room 2, my second wolf died because the first wolf died, gave the other one go invisible. I had a few more rounds with it, and then it finally suffered another hit. I got the wolves back, went invisible, then created the invisible wolves, had them run went into the third room after our one dude opened it. I forget what he, actually I think it was a bruiser. And then the invisible wolves went in, attacked. They weren't able to be attacked the turn prior because we did a kick open. We had invisible wolves. They didn't even suffer attack. Ran in there, suffered some stuff. And then there's this thing, we're going to get into one of the perks where you can like make some of your things turn invisible. So I actually had an invisible wolf for like quite a bit into like room 3, and I was like, man, this is great to do. So although I personally was banking on the fact that my 3 hit point melee summons were going to die, I used this as a way to like just get out of jail free card. But even then, the bottom of it, ignore the rest of it. Initiative 22, move 2, grant a summon move 2. This allows you, first off, that initiative's good, but it also allows you to pull a summon out of position or move it up if you do need to advance to a new room. This has multiple purposes. I think this is a very easy pick. It's a strong card regardless. And worst case scenario, if something goes awry, this allows you to recover that summon that you absolutely need. Keep in mind that you have some cards that say like, hey, recover a level 1. This doesn't say that. So if you have a high level loss, like you have a high level summon that just died, congratulations, you can get that back by burning just a level 1 card. And then when you do put it back into play, it's invisible. Shadow Dart, a useful tool. Attack 2 at range 4 with Curse and Infused Dark. Some people aren't going to want to take that because they want the summons to do the attack. They're going to like strengthen their summons and do like make the summon do the attack. Like the bottom where Forge Frosty. Hey, my summon's got advantage on all attacks. Now I'm going to make that summon do attacks, and then on its next turn it'll do those attacks still while strengthened. This one you kind of have to either rely on yourself, which is perfectly fine, but it just, it does give you dark and it does give a curse. Those aren't bad. And the 28 initiative isn't really that awful either. So, I mean, it's got purposes, it's good, but not every build is going to rely on it. But again, if you do want that dark, especially for that teleport, this one's one of your best ways of getting it. Also, the bottom is super useful in those scenarios. And we've seen this for like the Soul Tether, the Bone Shaper, any scenarios where there's like flame demons or stuff with like an annoying amount of retaliate, just immune retaliate. And so people go, hey, that's just decaying will from the Bone Shaper. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can reuse some effects. But like immunity to retaliate is something I think that many summoners toolkits should have. Now, I'm not saying that everyone, like we clearly saw in the Mind Thief, it doesn't have that, but I think that's okay. I don't think that they're one that necessarily needs to have a heavy summon toolkit, whereas the Bone Shaper and Life Tether clearly have that. It's mandatory, and I feel like in some scenarios you need to bring this just for that. Blackfire! So any Dragon Force fan's gonna love this. First off, Teleport 3 is great. Teleport 3 on a class that has no mobility, this'll help. 43 initiative is trash, but you can't have everything. The part about this I actually do really like is attack 1 at range 4 and wound. That's perfectly fine. It's not anything to like write home about. That's perfectly acceptable. Wound, especially at range 4. Range 4 is very good. But if you're going to try to do some of your own damage, push your own damage through, this is one of your best tools for it. But also, if you do consume fire, and I do remember I was like mentioning that for damage output, this allows you to target a second thing. So being able to attack 2 things, especially on your AMD, which we'll get later, well, there's some really cool things in your AMD toolkit, but wounding 2 enemies and getting an experience is very valuable. Especially if you have the ability to like lock them down with planner especially if you have the ability to like disarm them or screw with them, like the ability to like make them waste turns to attacking your little tanky summon. This one absolutely has value, but not everyone's going to want to bring it. So I can see this being kind of a little bit more of a sideboardy card just for that, but I think anyone who wants to be able to deal that wound is just hard to complain about, but if you want the damage, this gives you a little bit more of that and more of an area effect. It's not single target. Primal Assault. So first off, bottom heal, initiative 20, already going to be useful for most summoners. The initiative 20 is good enough that you are going to avoid most annoying effects, as well as being able to recover heals one of your summons or allies or yourself. The top it's a conditional loss that you aren't going to want to use all the time, but that's okay because the bottom is something you're going to want to use repeatedly. So I don't mind the top being a little bit more conditional. Grant 2 of your summons attack +1, which is not great for a loss. It's fine. But then also, depending on what elements you have, you're either going to chuck some curses in, allow them to ignore some shield, or wound at the enemies that get attacked as part of it, which is very strong. You're going to get 2 experience regardless. The elements don't give you more experience, but Depending on how you can set this up, this can actually punch through a lot. It's useful. I guess I'm not like super sold on it. It's fine. It's a perfectly fine top, but it's one of those where I don't think the top needs to be exceptional because the initiative and the bottom heel do enough carrying on its own that this is going to be a pretty good pick regardless. But this could actually punch through quite a bit if you set it up correctly. Drifting Stingers. I know it's Stingers, I just wanted to say Stingers. So this is the cool floating jellyfish. Attack 3, which is your best attack on level 1, although you're like, hey, the Shadow Wolves have 2 attack 2s, which is better. But this has a fly 1, which sucks. But, well, wind is strong and waning, it's fly 4. So you have move 5, so you have 5 health, fly 4, attack 3, as long as you have wind. And when you put this into play, you infuse air immediately. Very strong. This also has an initiative 90, which is an easy summon to protect at that level, and then teleport 3. So I think that the mobility that you have on this is pretty good, but I think if you're bringing the teleport, this isn't the card you bring just for a teleport. Just simply putting it. If you wanted more mobility, there's better options. This is the one you're bringing generally for the jellyfish, because the jellyfish actually has some pretty good, if you want just to like buff up one single summon, this is kind of the tool you have for it. But you do need to bring more wind infusion. So at least we have the gust at initiative 14 that allows you to keep that going. It's something that you can possibly count. Because once it's into combat, you can at least protect it and let it do that. But you're going to need to infuse wind to make sure it can get from room to room. And speaking of some wind stuff, biting wind. So this is something that's more interesting if the scenario more demands it, but it's an attack 2 at range 4 that pushes. But if you consume wind, and this is a lot, consuming wind gives it +1 attack, +1 range, +1 push, and 1 experience. That's just a lot for one element, but in the end it only turns into an attack 3, range 5, 1 experience, push 2, which is only slightly above the average level 1 action. It's not necessarily the greatest, but it's good. It's above average, but it does require an element in play, and pushes aren't necessarily a core part of your toolkit. But some scenarios you're going to see, like lots of traps, lots of hazardous terrains, and you go, you know what, for this scenario, I think this is something we can potentially use for that toolkit. So that's of course why it's an X for those scenarios. Also the bottom kind of allows you to effectively use that as well. First off, it gives you a nice little air infusion if you do need that, but it also move one of your summons up and then push everything around it by 1, especially if you have traps or something nearby. That push 1 can potentially add up to quite a bit. Sometimes it's probably not going to matter much, but then every enemy that you push in this way suffers 2 damage. This is, again, very powerful with traps because you can make them, first off, gives you a wind, and 2, allows you to push them into something and deal them 2 damage regardless. Even if they survive it, you might be able to just bring them low enough that the bottom's fine. It's not like the most powerful thing in the world, but the top, it's definitely, it's an X because in the scenarios that have that, you can do a lot, but there's a lot of scenarios where this isn't actually going to add as much. So keep it on your sideboard. It's a good sideboard card. And the last of the X cards, Unwavering Hand. This is very easy. 31's fine. It's just kind of like on the border of not good. I'm not as big a fan of it, but it's acceptable. Grant one of your summons attack +1 is perfectly fine, especially if you're doing one single like target summon where you're like, I want one big summon to do good things. Great, this is generally one of your bigger sources of damage, and the other one allows you to control an enemy, and that's generally used for like if you are dealing with traps. Alternatively, you can like say, hey, I know my summons just beat up on that guy. Can you move towards my other ally and hit them instead? It also gives you non-loss air, so very strong. Ultimately, it's not every build's going to bring this. The tanky build generally doesn't care about this as much. Some of the controller stuff, if you need the enemy to be in specific positions, and if the scenario does have a lot of traps, but like Biting Wind and Unwavering Hand with some kind of serve the same role. But if you do need the one summon that hits pretty hard, the top of this actually can go quite a bit, especially if they have cool effects, which we'll get to in some of the later summons. So we're going to go up to the level 3 cards because we can. Let's take a look at Intervening Apparitions. So this is grant whatever summons attack +0 and gain an experience, which is strictly worse than Mighty Bond or Bonded Might, but if you have fire, you actually make them attack in a cone. So that's something I actually really like because this allows you to very easily turn one attack into a multi-attack, and all you do is need fire. It still works really well for a striker build because you can give your summon advantage by strengthening them, and it also infuses fire, so then the turn later, while you have fire, you can use this to turn that into a multi-attack, which is very strong. It really depends on which summon you're playing with, and I think once we get to some of the later summons, we're going to see that this becomes notably more powerful. So yeah, we'll talk about those summons when we get there, but I really actually like the top part of this. But the bottom part, the next 3 sources of damage that would kill one of your summons, instead negate the damage, stun and invisibility the summon. This was really good for like kind of giving a bailout. Now I know this sounds like, oh crap, it's a loss, and then we have to stun our own summons. Yeah, but it effectively counts as 3 disarms because giving the summon stun and invisibility actually gets it a little bit further along than you'd think, because the invisibility means that for this round, any future attacks aren't going to land on it, which is good, and then potentially, depending on how you control the initiative for the next round, you could potentially keep them up quite a bit longer. So, and also, that means that they've just now wasted attack to burn a charge on this. I know it's only 3, but this adds up to a notable amount, especially if you need to protect a summon. It also gives you Dark if that's something you need to use, but the Dark is usually pretty minor because you're going to be using this at often a time where you think you need to be built out rather than, hey, I need this for the element. So it's something that can be used rather than can be reliably counted on. Ultimately, I do really like this card though. Void Imbuement, a very useful tool for scenario. First off, this one just has good damage output. The next 3 times, it's a permanent effect. The next 3 times your summons do things, but instead of falling off to your lost pile, it goes to your discard, which we actually really like. But +1 attack and +1 pierce to the attack. Really good with those Spirit Wolves for gnawing on living spirits. Spirits gnawing spirits. There's a jingle in here somewhere. As we know, one of the worst things that can happen to like life tethers or any summoners is like, oh, we have a bunch of weak attacks, but then they have shield. Congratulations, they die. Nope. You can eat through some of the shield. The +1 attack and the pierce one actually does such a good job of being able to break through shields that now your summons are able to have a few attacks where they chomp pretty hard and then let it fall off. You can always put this back into play. The 3rd attack also gives you an experience, so it's good for that as well. The bottom is actually pretty cool because grant one of your summons move +1 and jump. The jump is really good if you need them to if you need them to say, okay, the guy you're attacking will catapult yourself to the other side of the room, go attack that guy instead. Or if you need him to pull him back to safety. And if you have air, you can do this to 2 summons instead. Very, very powerful, and the initiative 23 is generally good enough undercut to screw with enemies. Plus, if you are bringing boosts of speed, this brings it down to a 13, which is always a good number to be at. Ultimately, I like both of these cards for various different reasons. I don't actually lean either way, but I think Void Imbuement is generally more universally easier to use, but I think I just like Intervening Apparitions top because I always like dealing damage, and turning one of your summons attacks into just a bomb is cool. And we're going to get to... I can't talk about the higher level summons, but we're going to talk about the 3rd level summon shortly, which goes well with it. Shaping the Void. Initiative 41 sucks. But attack 2 at range 4 is fine. It also allows you to draw from your AMD, which is going to be pretty neat. But it also allows you to ward something, very good for the tank thing, and allows you to infuse air non-loss, which is something that's going to be pretty easy to use. I think in general the tank build doesn't like wind as much, but ward is something that the tank build absolutely loves. Also, teleport 3 at the bottom and then heal all of your adjacent summons. So if you can just teleport up to your summons, heal 1 for 1, it's pretty good if you like, especially for enemies that have like wound. God, I hate enemies that wound. Honestly, it's more of a worse part to your toolkit than enemies that retaliate, because you have a card that can screw with retaliate. You always have to figure out how to like stop your wounded summons from dying. So this is one of those nice ways, but I think that this is a universally decent card that I think some people are going to lean on because it's never a bad pick depending on your build, because I think everyone's going to want to, hey, I want to deal some damage and keep my summons alive. Or, hey, I'm going to want to move up and keep my summons alive. It's an easy pick, but I generally kind of like the other card. Let's talk about that. Deadly Mischief. Mischief. So the bottom is something I'd really like, because I love bottom attacks. I love it being able to like punch. But I really like the summon. But even then, if you don't want to use the summon, an attack 2 at range 3 that gives you fire is good. It also allows you to pair that really well with like being able to strengthen something, punch out some damage, and fuse fire. You can keep the fire train rolling to use it for cool effects. This allows you to do a lot more damage. The fire build generally leans a little bit more to doing damage, but I do like the bottom. I think it's perfectly acceptable to play it that way. The summon is very similar to your jellyfish, but it doesn't fly, but it doesn't need an element. 5 health, move 3 instead of 4. It doesn't need an element, but 5 health, move 3, attack 3. The attack 3 is a perfectly fine summon. It's actually generally easy with your toolkit to keep alive, especially because you compare this with other things like the Thorn Shooter, or even with a Thorn Shooter. So you have the Thorn Shooter toss out some poison, then have this go to attack 4. But if this kills an enemy, you actually get the money token instead of having it fall to the ground. Now, I want to actually point out that while we are doing scenarios, we always try to figure out, hey, before we move to the next room, we need to scoop this token up. We need to scoop this token up. Having to save yourself the mobility of moving from this, but I need this token, and having it scoop it for you adds a little bit more than anticipated. I was initially doing this when I played this card, just to kind of screw with the people I was testing on my Thursday night test group, which I only did this. I actually think I only played this card in one of those scenarios. I think it was pretty early on, but I was like, I'm gonna steal money from them. But I'm like, no, this is legit useful, because it was easier to clean up the room and move forward. We didn't feel as we were wasting as much time to do that, and also it allowed me to get money. And like, people usually don't like complain like, oh no, like you didn't waste a turn because your imp during that action, yay, killed a thing, hey, and I get a gold for it. People didn't complain about it. I always love stealth ways to get the benefit of like looting without people yelling at me. So the damage is fine, the mobility is good, it's easier to protect because your toolkit, and it allows you to get money, which you do. This class can use a lot with money just because of enhancements, and there's a lot of good items that you're going to want. So yeah, I like the summon and I like the bottom attack. It doesn't matter which side of the card you prefer. Both of them have their uses in the toolkit, and I love it. All right, perk time. So one of the worst parts about general for summons is they don't usually have, you can see some classes, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to do an attack 6, and the -2 might suck on them, but it's especially bad for summons because they'll like, hey, I'm doing an attack 3, -2, okay, I did 1. It always hurts. So being able to drop the -2 is obviously important for this class. But something I actually really like is replacing the -1s with +0s, and then after the attack resolves, teleport 2. The amount of times this has bailed out a summon, when I did this in the 3 scenarios I played the Soul Tether, I think I only did 3, but I'm like, wow, that is great. And also the other one, replacing 0s with 1s that also grant one of your summons invis. It doesn't even need to be the summon that's attacking, but I was like, hey, this wolf attacks, this other wolf attacks. The wolf that's attacking is not going to get targeted, but the other wolf needs it. Turning the other wolf invisible, so it's just so, that was such a good card. Because first off, replacing 0s with 1s is fine, but then also getting free invisible on your summons is great. So both of these, fantastic. But also, the interesting part is if you do need some elements, you can also add +2s to your deck that due to the amount of, you're going to be drawing a lot of AMDs. Your summons are going to be attacking, you're going to be potentially attacking, or causing them to attack, you're going to draw several. So tossing in +2, and then any element combo you want, it really depends on which one, but all of those are generally, whatever fits your toolkit. Those are pretty strong. You're probably not going to pick all 3. But replacing 2+1s with 2+1s that add curse is pretty good if you're going for more of a controller and defender build that's trying to mitigate some damage. So that as long as your summons are attacking, they're going to be dealing out some curses too. That's cool. The next one, ignore scenario effects and add 2+1 cards. Kind of mandatory. Sometimes scenario effects can be that's not as impactful to you because you usually need to do it on summons, and a lot of times that, but like any scenario that say, hey, shuffle in some curses, that you don't want your summons to be cursed. So instead, this one's just a very easy pick. But I love the non-AMTs. Honestly, that's kind of a trend going forward, is the non-AMTs tend to be pretty cool. So the first one is at the beginning of each round in which you long rest. So you don't need to wait until you go, because that would be stupid. But while long resting, your summons have shield 1 for that round. If you're doing tanky, that's pretty nice, but especially, you know how I was saying, like, hey, you can Forged Ferocity, and then you can have this one that'll give him shield. Well, that guy's not going to go till 99, so you're not getting this shield. This one allows you, while you're long resting, all those have an extra shield in addition to whatever shield they would have. So, very good for those. I don't think, if you're playing some summons that they can't take hits anyway, it's probably not a good perk for that. But if you are picking summons that are going to be taking hits, this one's a very easy pick for 1 check. And here's another one that I love, that's bailing out. So this one allows you to, once per scenario, yoink, pull 1 summon wherever it is and teleport it adjacent to you. And during your turn, so you can like do everything. You can have all the summons go, have do your top action, your bottom action, burn some items, do everything you want, and then yoink it back. The fact that you can do that at any time during your turn, or even like, hey, I don't like you over there, I need you to attack this guy next to me, yoink, granted. Like, this has a lot of utility. Initially I thought this was like, oh cool, you get like to save 1 summon once, but it's got more uses than just that. So very strong perk. I think most summoners are going to end up taking it. And the last one, this is just cute. I like it, but once during the ordering of initiative, after everything's been revealed, you can look at this and say, wait, I'm triggering this, and make all your summons invisible. Easy get out of jail free card. Depending on what you can clearly see when the enemies are going, when you're going. It basically says that, like, once during any scenario, you can completely screw with some of the monsters' abilities to go. Maybe they're gonna lose attacks. I know it sounded like a little bit weird, but this is actually very strong because you have ultimate knowledge of when the monsters are gonna go after you get to reveal everything and then make the decision. If this was like, hey, you can just do this while you're picking cards or during your turn, that would be one thing. But now this is after all cards have been revealed, but before people start to take actions, which is basically the best time for anyone to be making any decisions on something that could potentially affect their turn. So yeah, pretty easy pick. I personally think it's probably not going to be as great for the defender builds, but I think for any of the damage dealers, this is one of the ways that you, like, if you have a high value summon out, you might want to protect them. This is easy. So I hope that was super helpful. Honestly, I'm a really big fan of this class now. It's something I enjoyed before. I wasn't really enthused about the class in the first time I did the campaign in first edition. I think I underestimated it. Ultimately, I was still kind of learning the game, and it was kind of just, it was there. But the second time I played the campaign with my other group of friends, I ended up like really doing a lot of effort in realizing that there's a lot of nuance to playing the class, and you had to learn to play it correctly. And that was fun. But I think that the expanded toolkit and even the nerfed summons makes this more useful. Honestly, I think this is one of the more powerful classes in second edition. Someone will correct me here, but that's just kind of my stance. I'd put it in the upper tier regardless. If not the top tier, the second. It's somewhere in there. But this is really good. So I hope that fans of the Soul Tether or fans of it in first edition enjoyed this. And if you did, what change do you like the most? What change are you most upset about? Please don't say Thorn Shooter. We knew it was coming. But what are you most excited about? What are you least excited about? Just let me know in the comments. So I'm really excited to see more of these classes. Finally glad that they got to show this off, so super enthused about that. So thanks all of you. Thanks to my Inox tier patrons. All of you are amazing. All my patrons are amazing, of course. I really appreciate your support. I'm finishing up the Meteor Guide, and I'm also have been bullied into. I'm finally doing it. I'm writing up my Frosthaven tier list video. That one's not going to be out immediately. So I've got a couple of Frosthaven videos I'm going to do amidst all these Gloomhaven 2nd edition previews, so stay tuned for that. I do have some early access videos up now. I forget, it depends on when this gets edited, so who knows what's going to be the state of this. But if you do want early access to some of these videos, be sure to subscribe to Patreon. I toss them up a little bit early. So thanks all of you for supporting me on Patreon, and thanks all of you for watching.